or the consumption by a small margin.
Okay.
Yeah, check what that one is.
Not good for them.
No, two different things.
Okay, we are live on YouTube. Hello, YouTubers.
Hello.
Hello. Um, okay, let's bookmark that and hit record. Hello and welcome to the Everything F1 podcast. Joining us today for oh fuck it. Hello and welcome to the Everything F1 podcast. Thank you for joining us as we get into our Chinese Grand Prix and sprint race review for this weekend. Joining me for this one is Coops. Evening, Coops.
Hello. How are you? I'm well.
I am very well as well. Did you enjoy the first sprint race of the season?
Yes. As much as I'm not a big fan of it, it was all right. Yeah, it was good to see a different car than what we're used to winning the sprint. Uh, I still don't think we should have any more than what we've got, but it
Yeah.
was all right. It done a job.
Yep, I completely agree. It was a little bit different. It wasn't the I suppose teaser for the main race that some of them tend to be. We'll get into all of that in just a minute. Before we do, we are Everything F1. You can check us out on all socials at Join EF1. You can also visit our website everythingf1.com for daily F1 and motorsport news and articles. We're well into the thick of it now. The Formula One season, lots going on. There's Formula One, Formula Two, Formula Three, Formula One Academy, IndyCar, WEC, everything you'll find news and articles for up on everythingf1.com. You can also check out our fantastic sponsors, theraceworks.com, and use our code EF1 for 10% off site wide if for all of your motorsport merchandise needs. Theraceworks.com, use code EF1 at checkout for 10% off site wide. Now then, before we get into the full review of the weekend of racing, we of course had a very sad loss in the Formula One world just earlier in the week, just before the weekend began, actually. Eddie Jordan, the former owner and founder of the Jordan F1 team, which of course is now Aston Martin after a couple of iterations, passed away on the 20th of March, age 76, surrounded by his family in Cape Town in South Africa. So just wanted to do a really, really quick piece on Eddie Jordan. As you could probably tell, I've mentioned it for several times on the podcast now. I am a proud Irishman myself, and I'm actually from the same town that Eddie grew up in. Eddie was born in Dublin, but moved to Bray, County Wicklow, where I'm from myself, as a child, and grew up here, and was a proud Bray and Dublin man himself. Eddie began karting in the early 70s. He actually won the Irish Karting Championship in 1971, so he was pretty handy at it. Continued racing all through the 70s and actually even competed in the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1981. He went on to found Eddie Jordan Racing in 1979. He signed some big names like Martin Brundle in 1983, who impressively finished second to none other than Ayrton Senna in British Formula 3. So already he was pretty good as a team manager as well, spotting some young talent. The team actually won the British F3 Championship in 1987 with Johnny Herbert. The team expanded into Formula 3000 later on and brought in future F1 stars like Jean Alesi and Eddie Irvine, even actually winning that title, the Formula 3000 title, with Jean Alesi in 1989. He is, of course, most famous to all of us for his step up to Formula One as team manager of the Jordan F1 team in 1991 with the 7 Up as the main sponsor. That absolutely stunning 191 Jordan with the 7 Up green all over it. It was a beautiful, beautiful car. It's also the car that gave Michael Schumacher his debut. Yes, it was Eddie Jordan that brought through the former most successful driver in Formula One history.
Mm.
He's had that title stolen off him, but no less important. We actually had a great discussion a couple of years ago with Mark Gallagher about that one. Do you remember that one, Coops?
Yeah, I do. I was that Mark Gallagher podcast is one that you need to go back and listen to. The stories that man comes out with are unreal, including stories about Eddie, Ayrton Senna, uh,
Michael Schumacher.
Michael Schumacher, Frank Williams. There's so many.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big loss, Eddie. He was a character, even for people like us that just seen him from a distance, has seen him on the TV, and the stories that came out. I mean, they're never going to make another Eddies. For someone who entered a team in Formula One at an era in Formula One where a lot of teams could spend an obscene amount of money, and he won with them
Mm.
more than once. He convinced some companies that had no right to be in a car to sponsor a team that small, like Ford, for example, Coca-Cola company with 7 Up. the things he did and some of the stories. Uh, if he wasn't such a likable person, you probably would hate him when you hear some of the stories. Like always, the Gary Anderson and the Race.com podcast mentioned things like in these earlier days, like he would always get introduced to other team sponsors and he would try and take them over. And if he
Mm.
found out a driver had money, he was in there trying to strike a deal. And he was a unique character. His celebration when they got 1-2 with Jordan at the Belgian Grand Prix. I want to say 1998. I think it was 97.
1998, yeah. David Hill won from Ralph Schumacher.
And him skipping along as he's getting in the car, and all the telling Ralph Schumacher, "No, you will, you will stay behind Damon Hill." And then the fallout from that, apparently, Michael Schumacher was incensed. Came in, told him that's it, blah blah blah. He's under contract, but if you send me the money, you can go. And apparently he did.
Mm.
And Ralph Schumacher moved on after that.
Mm.
But yeah, a big loss. But
Big,
someone
big
who we can
loss.
have cherish the memories and recount the stories over countless decades from now.
Yeah, that those highs for that team were, of course, that 1-2 victory in Belgium in 1998. And they also actually went on to win twice in 1999 with Heitel Frentzen. And if I'm not wrong, he finished third in that championship that year. Their team finished third that year as well. Jordan F1, as I said, is now Aston Martin. And Eddie, of course, after selling the Jordan F1 team in the early 2000s, went on to have an extremely successful career as a broadcaster, host, pundit with the BBC, even hosting Top Gear for a little while back in the day after the original trio left. So we're very sad to see it. Personally, like I said, as a kid growing up in Ireland in the 90s, the Formula One had not quite permeated the zeitgeist as it has now with the help of things like Drive to Survive. And I just remember getting into the sport in the late 90s and being told that, one of the team owners was from my hometown. Those absolutely stunning bright yellow cars were very, very hard to miss on the TV, especially when they were going winning races. But even when they weren't, they were very, very noticeable. And as someone who went on to marketing in my later years, my favorite piece of clever remarketing on a Formula One car ever was the Benson Hedges rebrand to Be on Edge in 2002 and 2003 at certain races. It was like Britain and the US and stuff like that, various races over those couple of years where cigarette sponsorships were not allowed anymore. Rather than
Yeah,
replace them really, really tackily with something else, they literally just sort of painted over a couple of letters on the Benson Hedges logo and it just read Be on Edge. And if there's anything more appropriate for Formula One, I don't know what that is.
that
I'll
was
never
probably
forget
to
that.
save a bit of money, Ray.
Also, yeah.
I think Buzz and Hissies was another good one they did.
Yeah.
And that the yellow Jordan with the kind of the snake
The
head
snake
fangs and
heads.
the cone.
Yeah.
Even the night is it 1991 the Jordan 191.
191.
When you come out with liveries, and that's one of the ones that still to this day is one of the top ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, the man's.
That
We could
that
just have a podcast talking about Eddie Jordan, to be honest.
And with a week off to come, we might well do just that. But anyway, we'll move on from that for right now. We just wanted to say rest in peace, Eddie. You'll be sorely missed. And thank you for the legacy you've left in Formula One. Now then, on to the Chinese Grand Prix. We'll start with the sprint because it was the first sprint race of the season. And it was quite an interesting one, actually. Obviously, only one practice session, four sprint weekends. And qualifying went possibly not as many people were expecting. Lando Norris languished down in sixth. Lewis Hamilton was on sprint pole with Max Verstappen second and Oscar Piastri third. And they finished in the sprint race. Hamilton won from sprint pole. Verstappen was second, Piastri third, Leclerc fourth, Russell fifth, Norris sixth, Antonelli seventh, and Sonoda scored the final point for the sprint in eighth. So, what did you make of the first sprint and Hamilton's technically first win in red?
I mean, it was good fun. I don't say that often about sprint races. It's long known that I'm a bit of a purist. I'm not a fan of them. I quite like the racing to be kept to Sundays. That's the whole point,
Mm,
or a Saturday evening if it's in Las Vegas. Uh, but yeah, this one was good fun. It was nice to see Lewis get in first place. Probably more to do with the fact that I don't think we expected it that soon.
mm.
I don't think he expected that soon, but things just worked in for him. But it does raise more questions than answers in that they weren't able to transfer that kind of pace to qualifying later on in the day and also onto the race. So that'll be confusing. Obviously for obvious reasons we have there's more reason to discuss Ferrari later on, which uh, adds to the list of things they need to try and figure out. But for the sprint itself, it was good. I quite enjoyed it. I didn't quite enjoy the time. Although my cat decided to wake me up early, so I just decided to get up and watch the sprint. I didn't watch it live. I watched it about an hour or two late, and then it was just enough time, just in good time to sit and watch the qualifying. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, it was decent. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, same. It shook things up a little bit. And as I said at the start, it was nice to have a sprint that was very different from the Grand Prix for I think just having so much extra running on the track over the weekend, rubbered in the surface more. It's a new enough surface and just the tires seem to last so much longer. We get into the likes of Ollie Behrman doing his super long stints on both on the medium tires in the second half of the race, which didn't seem possible after the sprint at all. Fascinating to see. But I think part of the discussion as well around this was just what happened to McLaren. I think they sort of admitted themselves they kind of just got the plan wrong. Everybody else, the Ferraris in particular, only did one qualifying run in SQ3. And the McLarens did two, and they did two runs on the same set of tires. They didn't have enough time to do it properly. The tires were gone off, and the track had rubber did a bit more. That seems to have been, as far as I could see, the main thing that did it.
Yeah, I think it was like the circuit itself was brand new. They
Mm,
relayed the track, um, and as things started to rubber in. But I think the other thing that it's a weird situation with tracks because if you have more grip on a track, you cause more degradation because the tires are getting wore out quicker,
hmm
which seemed to be the main issue over the weekend. But yes, once things rubbered in, some people seemed to get a bit better with it, other people didn't, and it tended to. It was a weird one for the race as well because I don't think they never used the hard tire at all until the actual race. They didn't use it in qualifying either.
mm
And then the degradation didn't seem to be as bad for certain people. I don't think it was that big of an issue at all, in all honesty.
Didn't really seem to be. They all seem to be able to, for the most part, drive through the grade. They all seem to get bad grading, particularly on the mediums, and they were able to just sort of drive through it eventually. Maybe that's just what it was for the sprint. It literally wasn't long enough for them to drive through that grading.
But yeah, that's probably what it was. That you were finishing it right slap bang in the middle, especially if is it the front right or the front left?
The
Because
front
it's a clock
left.
front left. Uh, yeah, that front left was the one that took the punishment because of the type of because it's clockwise and the type of corners you had, very high speed ones that last for a while as well.
Mm.
Uh, So yeah, probably that was the biggest issue at the sprint was the fact that you're hitting Greenham within 4 or 5 laps and you've not got through it and managed to get past that phase by the time you finish.
Yep. Very interesting first sprint of the season. Anyway, the next one I believe is Spa. It's not for a while anyway.
Yeah, there's one quite early on and then it's a wee bit later on.
Oh,
It will
Miami is the next one.
well, okay.
My
Well
my
they need to do something with that circuit to be fair. So
Yeah, that's true. Miami, Spa, Austin, Sao Paulo, and Qatar are the remaining sprints for this year. So the next one is Miami on the 4th of, the 3rd of May. Moving on then to the main event, qualifying for the main race. Again, little bit of a surprise because Lando had been leading the way in Q1 and Q2, but it was actually Oscar Piastri who pipped him to pole position, and even at that, then George Russell pumped in a stunning lap at the end to pip Norris to second. Norris started third. Verstappen was even impressed with himself, finishing fourth. The Ferraris came in fifth and sixth in qualifying. Hadjar was very impressive, up in seventh ahead of Kimi Antonelli, and Yuki Tsunoda and Alex Albon squeezed into the top 10. But obviously, the big talking point from qualifying, again, sadly, Liam Lawson starting plumb last in 20th. I have a few thoughts on Liam Lawson, but I'll let you go first on this one. What did you make of his qualifying to begin with?
oh well, it was awful. Considering what he did in Australia or didn't do in Australia, it was exactly what he shouldn't be doing in China. You want to, if he came like, see if it was 15th, 14th, 12th, you would be like, that's disappointing. But it's plumb last.
Yeah.
Uh, and not like he was relatively close to Bortoletto, but he still it wasn't close. He just couldn't get excuse me, he couldn't get the tires working. And maybe that's a novice thing because the tire pressures had to get them working to a certain window for them to be grippy enough. But you're in a Red Bull, you need to do better. Um, and if rumor are to be believed, that maybe a change may be coming sooner rather than later.
Yep, certainly maybe. The obviously the next race is Japan, which is Yuki Tsunoda's home race, and we'll get onto the race result very quickly before we touch on this. Oscar Piastri was first from Lando Norris, who jumped George Russell off the start, finished third. Verstappen finished fourth ahead of Ocon, Antonelli, Albon, Behrman, Stroll, Sainz, Hadjar. Lawson finished 12th in the end. Doohan, Bortoletto, Hulkenberg, Tsunoda, and Alonso was didn't finish. He DNF'd in the first lap. And then, as we get into it a little bit, Leclerc, Hamilton, and Gasly were all disqualified. But just sticking on the Racing Bulls and Red Bull, actually, for the moment. Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda had a brilliant weekend, but that 16th on the last of the finishers does not represent that. Racing Bulls screwed him over again, and then his wing exploded.
Yeah.
There was no
Right on the
contact. It just
straights, put a bit of load and it just popped. That's a strange one.
very strange one.
You would like to think that's just a slight anomaly. Maybe it's a micro crack or something, a wee fracture there for going over the curb, or is it just one of those anomalies where the bonding agent didn't quite work because it seemed to be between a couple of the winglets?
Yeah, that's what it
Either
seemed to
that,
be. All right.
yeah. So that's definitely something that the team will need to go back on and have a look at. And for once, a Yuki Tsunoda tantrum about his broken wings came into the pits was probably pretty well,
Fully warranted.
it'd be like, when, where, how? Like, yeah, even the commentators were going, when
How'd
did
that
this
happen?
happen?
Yeah,
And then they saw the replay. So yeah, it's a shame. Yuki's been doing well. It's only been a couple of races, but he's just quietly got about his business.
certainly has.
Um,
Even Helmut Marko, who is, let's say, not famous for doling out compliments, has said that Yuki is in the form of his life at the moment. Which, okay, begs the question again. He sort of was towards the end of last year as well. Why is he
mhm.
not in the Red Bull yet? And I suppose this comes to the first big question of the day is, will he be for his home race in Japan, which is in 2 weeks?
Do you know what? I wouldn't be surprised. Uh, Liam Lawson isn't able to get where he needs to get now, and being in Red Bull, you kind of have to be. You kind of need to be on point. And for whatever reason, the car's just not working for him, or he's not able to figure the car out. And this is not, and it's not necessarily a reflection on him,
Hmm.
because how many second drivers have we had that in that Red Bull that can't do it? I mean, Max Verstappen is a generational talent and is able to work that car because it is so nuanced and deal with it. And drivers of his caliber are able to do that. But
Hmm.
you don't have many. You don't have 20 drivers that are of the caliber of Max Verstappen. You just don't. And the problem that Red Bull have had is the way they've treated their driver academy recently. You're kind of at a point where you're putting people in that aren't ready, and they've done that for a few years.
Hmm.
Albon was supposed to be driving for Formula E, got the call to jump in. Within 6 months of he was out. They brought Brendan Hartley back, God knows how many times, because of his experience in world endurance racing. Um, I'm sure Kvyat's been out and in a couple of times.
Yeah,
And then
Nick
Gasly's
DeVries,
been in, he's been
Gasly.
out. And
So this kind of raises my question. My big one around Liam Lawson is, well, we saw him do pretty well in his deputizing duties for Daniel Ricciardo after he broke his wrist in 2023. Jeez, that
mhm,
doesn't seem like that long ago. And then obviously he replaced Danny permanently in whatever they were called last year, racing v Carb
V carb.
Bulls last year, for 11 races, and apparently that was enough. But the question then is, it's no surprise, and it's all but been confirmed that that car is. We know it, but they've actually finally started saying it. That car is designed to suit Max's driving style. It's not that Max gets any more of the car. He doesn't get any like he might get new parts first, but he doesn't have like back in the days where Fernando Alonso or Sebastian Vettel would get a whole new wing for half a season that Mark Webber wasn't getting. It's
Hmm.
not like that anymore. They do get equal treatment in terms of all the parts. The fact of the matter is, the core concept, the fundamental platform of the car is designed around Max's style of driving, which is a pretty loose rear end and a super easy turn in. He just wants a really sharp nose and a loose back end, and for some reason, he can drive it like that. So, that being said, if Yuki steps up for Japan, and Yuki is in fantastic form at the moment, the results sadly do not show it right now, but you have to look a little bit beyond the final results, and you actually have to watch the races to understand. Yuki is driving extremely well at the moment. If he steps up and all of a sudden he's 20th, there can be absolutely no discussion whatsoever or debate. This is Red Bull's fault. I'm not saying that will
Hmm.
happen. Yuki steps up and dominates and goes and scores within a place of scores points and is right beside Max. Then conversation over. Liam wasn't the best choice in the first place. I don't think that's going to happen. Personally, I think if Yuki steps up, he's going to have the exact same problem at least in his first couple of races. And the thing with Red Bull is they don't give time to bed in. It's either you can do it or you can't do it, which basically means either you're Max Verstappen or you're not Max Verstappen. And everything in the entire universe is either Max Verstappen or not Max Verstappen. There's not
Hmm.
two of him. Um, so that's one thing. So I don't think I like if I was Yuki, I would be saying, lads, I'm like, where am I in the championship at the moment? Yuki Tsunoda is currently Oh, he's miles. Sorry, he's 13th in the championship, but he should arguably be after those disqualifications today. He had points coming. He should be in the top 10 comfortably in the championship at the moment. He's fighting for points and qualifying fifth. Why would he want to go into that Red Bull at the moment? Because he is as quick as Max in the Red Bull at the moment. Um, and if he does and he steps up and he can't do it, then there's no questions to be asked. So the other question then is what if Max had left this year? This is something I heard raised on another podcast because there was so much talk, and Toto Wolff was banging on the door, and Aston Martin are knocking as well. What if Max? It won't, and even like they must be designing next year's car in this same way because they don't seem to want to sacrifice even a millisecond of Max's performance to benefit the second driver, which has now gotten to the point of stubborn beyond belief because they know they can't win championships with just one driver anymore. So if they get 6 months into this year and they've designed next year's car, the fundamentals of next year's car around Max, and then Max leaves, what are they going to do? Call Sergio Perez back and put Liam Lawson, both of whom, in a car that they can't drive?
They're going to
Like,
get they're going to get the checkbook out and they're going to have to buy one of someone else's marquee driver. They're going to have to do that. You're going to go out there and spend a shitload of money on your Piastri or Norris.
but will that be? Will they be? But this is the question as well: is would they be able to do a Piastri? Maybe, but is Norris going to be able to drive Max Verstappen's car? I don't think so. I think of everyone on that grid, Fernando Alonso probably could get to terms with Max Verstappen's car. Maybe Charles Leclerc, but I don't
Yeah,
see any of the rest of them doing it.
it is a tricky one. And if Yuki Tsunoda goes out to Japan and there's not some sort of weird situation where he ends up in the bottom three or the bottom five in qualifying, then you're right. The question has to be, it's the car then,
Yeah.
because everyone said that, like with the drivers we've mentioned, especially like guys like Alonso, Albon, sorry, they've all faltered. Arguably, Albon could have stayed longer if it wasn't for Lewis Hamilton spinning him in Austria when he was at the front, because
Yes, that's
he
true.
could have won it. He did have a technical gremlin after, uh, but again, what if? Uh, but if Yuki does what he's supposed to do, and he see if he gets that car in Japan and gets it in 10th for Q3, then it's Yuki's drive for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Uh, that's all he'll be asked to do. Get it into Q3. Don't
Yep.
care about anything else. Just get it into Q3. And if he flings that car around and flings it into Q3, either his driving style is similar to
Max's.
Verstappen's, where
Yeah.
they can deal with the car, or he's just more adaptable. And then that's you've got your two drivers. Then you can work on. Then Liam Lawson can go back and do what Albon did. Liam Lawson going back to the racing bulls after two races is a horrible thing to happen. It's not the end of his career.
It's the best thing for his season, arguably.
Best thing to look at Albon,
Yeah.
Gasly, they've both survived I don't think Albon's won a race since, but
Al
Gasly's won.
Albon hasn't,
So,
but Gasly has. Carlos Sainz has after being dumped out of Toro Rosso.
hmm
Even Daniel Ricciardo left him and eventually went and won a race again for McLaren. So it's a career killer if you stay there. It's not a career killer to be dumped out. I think that's the
no,
like look at Sergio Perez. I can't see Sergio Perez coming back to Formula One. I know everybody thinks he's coming back to Cadillac. He's not. He's just not. I'd
no,
be shocked if that happens because they're not going to need his money. And as we said a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, it's more likely to be someone like a Bottas who is probably actively testing in the wind tunnels and the simulators next year's cars, which Sergio Perez is not doing.
no.
Um, that
Sergio
is a
Perez
career
could be a
killer.
good driver in IndyCar, to be honest.
He absolutely could. And I've said this 1,000 times. Sergio Perez is a world-class midfield driver. And I mean that in the greatest compliment in the world. You've got plenty of, like, not everybody could be a world champion.
No.
But compare Sergio Perez to Nico Hulkenberg. Nico Hulkenberg's never got a podium. Sergio Perez has won multiple races and dragged his crappy racing point and whatever it was called before that, Force India,
Force
into
India.
podiums all the time. He nearly won a race with Sauber in 2012. He came one damp patch in Malaysia away from beating Fernando Alonso to a win in his second season. So Perez is a good driver, a very, very good driver who on his day can do it, but his day only comes every now and then.
Yep.
But he's beyond it now. I don't like. I think Liam Lawson could be the same. I think Yuki Tsunoda could be the same. If you give them the opportunity, they'll take it. But it's easier said than done when when Max Verstappen, like you said, generational talent. It's like you couldn't ask somebody to hop in Ayrton Senna's car and drive it the way he did it. Alan
No.
Prost is proof of that, and Alan Prost is one of the most successful drivers in history. And even
And one
he
of the
couldn't
most,
get fully on terms with Senna.
yeah, and he's one of the most technical drivers.
Exactly.
He was nuanced a bit, like was it Schumacher, and it was very much to the second. Everything was professored out,
Yes,
to share his
methodical.
nickname.
Yeah.
Yeah, methodical. That's probably the better expression. And he still couldn't work it. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people are, they're putting on a bit of weight here about Liam Lawson. They're putting on like the second driver. This is what we mean about generational talent.
Hmm.
This is the point. Like Valtteri Bottas, very similar to Perez in a sense of he's a good driver. He can win races. You put him up against Lewis Hamilton. It's not a
He's
contest.
he's not
It's just
winning a
not
championship.
happening.
Yeah.
And that was why we always laughed at the start of the season when Bottas was like, yeah, here's Bottas 2.0. Yeah, cool.
3.0, 4.0, 5.
No
Now,
bother, Paul. Yeah,
to
crack on.
Bottas's credit, he is the only driver from in Mercedes history with a 100% Q. Sorry, he's the only driver, yeah, in Mercedes history with a 100% Q3 record. He
Fair
never
enough.
ever missed Q3, which is a really impressive stat that I read last week when Kimi Antonelli didn't make Q3. It's like Valtteri continues his trend, so that was impressive. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see what Red Bull do now. Like, do they leave Liam here? There's also, sorry, the other point I wanted to make, just kind of in Lawson's defense a little bit, is he hasn't had any practice.
No, it doesn't. It's never raced in these two tracks.
He's never raced on these two tracks, and actually, Karun Chandok made the point after the race. Um, that Kimi Antonelli was given what 10,000 kilometers of test mileage last year in old Mercs. Old Mercs which are not that different to the current Merc. And because Red Bull were humming and hawing and kicking the can down the road, they couldn't make up their bloody minds.
You've
And
seen how
then
the last one signed before this season, isn't
yeah,
it?
he was, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But even when it came down to it, when they had signed him, they had plenty of time. They had December, they had January, they had all of February, and they'd half a March to give him runs in old cars, and they never did. They gave him preseason testing, which was a day because the car was crap and he got no mileage. And then he goes into Australia, and there's a practice session which was red flagged, a third practice session which was red flagged, which he missed anyway because there was a fault with the car. So he had no practice for Australia, which is a bloody tough track anyway that he'd never driven.
hmm
And then he comes to China, a track he's never driven, gets 1 hour of practice, and then has to do two qualifying sessions and two races. So, in Liam Lawson's defense, and I'm really surprised that like Sky or like no media has pointed this out yet, other than Karun Chandok today, Liam Lawson has had virtually zero running in that car.
Yeah.
And that's
Uh,
okay if you're Gabriel Bortoleto and you're a talented driver, but you're actually expected to drag your wheelie bin to last on the road every weekend.
exactly. I
For
mean,
Liam Lawson, like he's had no practice at all. So the flip side of it is, do they wait until Japan, a track he knows very well because he raced in Super Formula there for years, and he raced in Formula 2 there and Formula 3. So he knows Japan, he knows Suzuka as well as anyone else. And they see if a track that he knows can improve it, and then maybe sack him off after that if he can't pull it out of the bag.
It is a very poor indictment of the way that Red Bull are running their stuff just now. Obviously, Mercedes were they done it the right way. They kind of, even with all the talk about Verstappen coming, I don't think Toto Wolff was ever going to do anything about that. I think it was just gamesmanship between him and Horner. I
Mm.
think they'd said pretty much early on and internally that, Antonelli's next season. So I need you guys, pre-season last year, right, we're going to go with Antonelli unless something majorly bad happens. I need you guys to set out a 12-month plan
Hmm. To get this
and
kid ready.
you get him in these cars and you just go, simulator and just get him in the environment. Obviously, things didn't work out in his first free practice session, but they must have had a shitload of data behind them to look at it and go, do you know what? Yeah, fine.
He's
He'll
worth the
figure it
risk.
out where
Yeah,
we're going with it. And as you say, to fire someone in, I mean, look at the changing conditions for Australia. I mean, Australia caught out
everybody.
a race winner and a multiple world champion.
Yeah.
You really, and then China, he's never raced on either. Although, yes, it was dry. And with a car that's so particular as Red Bull, you would think that they would have said, right, you've got 2.5 months. We are going to run you and drive you. You're going to be doing this. This is all your life is. Move into the garage, get your sleeping bag. We're doing this. You're training, eating, driving, and that's it.
Yep.
And you're doing it for two months or whatever. Um, and then if he comes out and if he was like 12th, 13th, 14th, but he's like point 0.4, 4 tenths away, you can go, do you know what? That's not bad. But being dead last twice and
Yeah.
unable to figure out the nuances to get the car out, the tyres into the right window, that's learned. That's something that you learn as you go. And Red Bull, I can understand their changes, but it's not an indictment of Liam Lawson. That's an
No.
indictment of the system. That's an indictment of them, and probably more Marco than anybody else. If you're coming out and saying things already, Christian Horner seems to be the person to say we'll work with him. We'll try and figure this out.
But he always is. I mean, he said we'll give Alex time and then he fired him. He said we'll give Sergio time and then he did and then he fired him.
Yeah,
Um,
I suppose. I
but
suppose
at
he's
least
saying
at
the
least
right thing.
in public at least he's saying the right things. Unlike Marco is just going, yeah, you're embarrassing, you're crap, you're awful, get out.
Yeah, and
A man, by the way, who is not employed by Red Bull and has absolutely zero platform to be saying any of this, but he's allowed to be, which is another problem with Red Bull that's been going on for way too long.
yeah, and I think what a pretty big eye opener as well when they interviewed Christian Horner. Liam Lawson was 20th, and Ted Kravitz basically kind of nailed him and said, I mean, you didn't sack off
Saxon.
Perez. Why did you sack Perez off to get 20th on the grid? And you're like, who else do you do that to? 'Cause you haven't said that. Like, Antonelli didn't have a great first qualifying in Australia. Did they do that to him and go, well, you didn't bring in him to replace, Hamilton and get 14th or 15th? What you doing? And as you say, there seems to be a short memory about the actual experience and training and lead up time that Red Bull have not given Lawson.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
maybe him moving is just a clear sign of, do you know what? He's not quite got to the point, but some of it's on us. And we're going to put you back on the Red Bulls. We're going to take the pressure off you. We're going to work with him, get the systems in place. But then again, he's going to be spending a season in a car that's not the Red Bull. And it's the Red Bull car that's the problem.
and exactly. And if so, say he steps up and Yuki has an okay season, and then he earns himself an Aston Martin Honda drive for next year. Wild speculation. And all of a sudden, there's a slot free at Red Bull again, and Lawson steps back up. It's the same problem because fundamental, like even Max Verstappen himself said that Liam Lawson would be quicker in the racing bulls, and a lot of people were like jumping down Max's throat for this. Oh, you disrespectful prick, and blah 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 blah. He's right. And he
Yeah.
probably meant it with the greatest of respect because he himself knows that that car is designed for his particularly unique driving style,
Mhm.
which even he can't seem to fully explain how he gets the most out of it. He just sort of can. And he's saying Liam will be quicker in the racing bulls. And okay, maybe he meant it as a jibe and people are taking it in all offense, but he is right. That's just the end of it. And again, you look at like if like Alex Albon or Carlos Sainz or Pierre Gasly were probably all on the consideration list for last year. Why would any of them want to go back to Red Bull? ever. Why would anybody want to
No.
take that? Like Daniel Ricciardo is maybe the one who you'd think, well, he has nothing else to play for, bring him back. But if he's looking at that going, did you already ruin my career twice? Why would I want to do it a third time? Like that cup is that car is such a poison, and I can't believe that we're still having this conversation because it's been what Kvyat, Gasly, Albon, Perez, technically Ricardo,
Mhm.
and now Lawson have all come up against Max in a car designed for Max and not been able to drive like Max because, shocker, they're not Max. And we're
Yep.
still sitting here going, oh, well, they're just not good enough for Formula One. Bullshit. It's
Yeah.
they're not Max Verstappen. And that's okay. Not every, but like I said, like that, like, is it a bad thing to not be Max Verstappen? Sure, you're not a four-time world champion, but not everybody can be Max Verstappen.
And that's fundamentally the main reason why Red Bull don't win constructors championships because they
And
don't seem to get that. They don't seem to take that on board. You give some slight nuances to your car. If Lewis Hamilton's there and he says move the cockpit back a wee bit, and he's already won you 6 championships, well, you're going to listen to him.
And exactly, sorry, that's the other point as well, is Red Bull refused to give up even an inch to Max. But if Max is the generational talent that we all know him to be, he'll fucking adapt.
Well,
He'll
yeah,
pull back,
that's
change 1% of the car to help your second driver, and tell Max to get 1% better. Or
I know
Max being 1% worse than himself is still better than almost every other driver on the grid.
exactly, and and you look at this year, like the car's just not there, and they need both drivers.
Yeah,
And they're going to throw Liam Lawson under the bus because I don't think he's going to come out and do amazing when he goes to Japan. With the
no,
knowledge of the track, I still think there's going to be issues. I think he might get a Q2. If he gets Q3, then okay, right.
yeah, different
Let's
story.
let's let's leave him. Probably the summer break
But
at that
I
point.
think
But I
the problem
still
with that
think there's
car,
issues.
it's the fact that it's a loose rear end. Even at high speed, like even Max, like you saw him today, like going through the first corner and the last that the was the turn 12 coming onto the back straight.
Mhm.
Long, fast, flat out right-handers. And he's twitching like crazy. He just happens to be able to hold it in a straight line, twitching like crazy because the back is so
Mhm.
loose. That's going to be the same in Japan. Japan is a fast flowing circuit. And if you have a sharp rear end and a loose as hell back end and you don't know how to drive that way, he might as well go enjoy Tokyo Drift for
Yep.
all the speed Lawson is going to be able to pull out of that car going through the Senna S's in Japan. But we'll leave it at that for now. That was I had a few discussions came to mind from Liam Lawson and
Mhm.
Red Bull over the past couple of weeks. Let's move on. We'll very quickly touch on McLaren. There's not all that much to talk about for them because they had their pretty dominant 1-2, their 50th 1-2 in Formula One history, which is very impressive. Oscar Piastri led from pole to flag, which was also very impressive. He had a slightly iffy start, but he blocked off George Russell just enough to get into that awkward first corner and disappeared from there, managed his tyres. He is a completely unbotherable human, and he was completely unbothered by anything in that race.
Yep.
And top job, definitely recovered well after Australia. Lando Norris got a very good start for a change, and jumped George off in turn one, and even with brake failure at the end, he did really well to hang on to his second place there at the end.
He did. He did. It was a good weekend if you're a McLaren fan for the Grand Prix. Norris that last few laps. The last lap was like I was getting a bit kind of.
It was hairy
Uh,
eyes.
yep, as you said before we started recording, like I said, one lap more, and you're like, no, one corner. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, you were probably right. He probably wouldn't have made the next lap, to be honest, going by what they were saying with the brake issue. But yeah, I did have to laugh when Piastri came on, and they're like, "Well, congratulations, first place." He's like, "Yeah, it was pretty good." And you're
yeah,
like, "It's just like he's went to drive to the shops.
yeah.
It's that's
Did you
his
get
first
did you
first
get the milk?
pole.
Oh yeah, got the
I got
milk.
that.
Yeah, got Paul.
Cool.
Got the win.
Won a Grand Prix. First win from my first ever pole. Not first win, but first pin from his first pole.
Yeah.
Uh,
He has a
yeah.
100% pole conversion record, which Charles Leclerc could only dream of these
Yes.
days,
Exactly.
and Lando Norris for that matter, actually.
Lando Norris got help from Piastri because he did exactly what he should have done because to kind of cause George Russell to lift off, which gave
Yep.
Lando what it needed to give him to get him back in.
Yeah.
Uh,
Team
yeah,
managed the race perfectly. The pit stops. Oscars was a little bit slow, but he did what he needed to, and he actually pushed out a bit of a gap to Lando before he pitted, so he covered
yep.
himself off perfectly. Lando, to his credit, jumped George twice because he came out behind him. George undercut him,
Hmm.
and Lando got a really, really good overtake on him. But just a word on George Russell as well while we're on him. Great start to the year. He's going completely under the radar. And he is currently third in the championship, 1 point behind Max Verstappen. He's just and 1 point ahead of Oscar Piastri. He's not been in the conversation, but he's not been out of the picture.
No,
Doing
and that's
exactly what he needs
typical.
to.
That's typical George. He'd done that a lot last year.
Yep.
You know, in a car that was fundamentally had some issues against the guys in front, and you know, you get to the end and oh, George is fourth. Oh,
Yeah.
where'd he come from? Or George is fifth, and then it culminated in what should have been a victory in Spa and was taken away from a technical infringement, which we will get to because it's creeped up again.
Yes,
Not
we
for
will.
him, but in general.
For someone
And
else.
but yeah, George is doing exactly what he needs to do. I think fundamentally they know that the car's not a championship contender, but it will take wins, it will take podiums. Antonelli's just quietly again getting on his job. I think was he in the points again? Yeah, eighth or
Yeah,
something.
he started eighth and finished eighth. Now he got a little bit unlucky. He had a good start, but he got unlucky with his pit stop. Came out. They fed him out into traffic, unfortunately.
Well,
Um,
that's a whoopsie.
and he just like yes, it's got a really really long straight, and yes, they extended the DRS zone by 75 meters. But overtaking in China, especially when you're in a crocodile of cars, is really difficult.
Mhm.
Especially because that corner onto the straight is just like if you're not in clear air, you're not driving out of that cleanly ever. Um, so he did recover to eighth. He finished where he started. And the fact of the matter is, McLaren are first in the standings on 78 points, which is a very strong start for them. And Mercedes are second on 57, already pretty well clear of Red Bull at 36. And Red Bull are already in the mold of they only have one driver scoring points. They are going to be left behind as soon as Ferrari start remembering how to finish races. And with that one,
Mhm.
shall we get on to the big Ferrari stag-sized elephant in the room? A double disqualification. For the first time in Ferrari history, both drivers have been disqualified from the same race, and Lewis Hamilton sets a new record that I bet he never wanted. He's the first driver in history to win and be disqualified in the same race weekend.
Wow.
Yeah, how weird a stat is that? um, which is a big shame. Now they were clearly lacking for a bit of pace at the end, even though Lewis pitted, and obviously Charles had a broken wing for the entire race. He did really well actually to keep it on the track with that broken wing, but that cost Ferrari I think it was 19 points they lost. They were at
Yeah.
35 points. They're now at 17 points, behind Williams, who were obviously the big beneficiaries of this and got a double point finish for themselves. But would you like to inform us all as to why both Ferraris were disqualified, please? And
Right.
thank
So
you.
that this comes down to small margins. Well, in the case of Lewis Hamilton, it definitely does. So Lewis Hamilton's the rear part of the skid plate underneath the car was 0.5 millimeters under tolerance. So it wore down too far. Every
But
single team has the same situation. They all have to do that, and the cars are set up. So the ground effect cars, the lower to the road you set it, the better performance your aero works with these set of regulations. However, they can't go as low as they want because if they go too low with the bumpy tracks and curbs, you could be your plank out too much. So effectively, everyone has to kind of get to a certain line. Ferrari basically came out afterwards and went, "Yeah, we misjudged that, and it caused Lewis Hamilton to be 0.5 millimeters underneath the regulation that's allowed for where he's disqualified." Charles Leclerc was disqualified for being 1 kilogram underweight. Everyone has a minimum weight to make sure that people aren't, putting ballast in the cars or taking ballast out or whatever, to make their cars faster. Because the lighter your car is, the faster it goes. Uh, he was a kilo under. They've officially come out and said that that was due to Charles Leclerc going for a one stop and they miscalculated the wear in the tyres. A bit like George Russell last year in Spa, didn't pick up enough marbles. But I think in Spa it was they don't do the lap after because it's too big, so you never got a chance to pick
hmm,
up the marbles to bring the weight back up if your driver does it. And they've been busted, and that's it. two separate issues, but both disqualified.
Yeah, big shame. And for just to help visualize that on Lewis Hamilton's skid plate, it was what 0.5 millimeters
Yeah,
too worn. That is about the depth of the thickness of a credit card.
yeah,
If even like and a thin credit card at that. There is it was tiny margins. Unfortunately, and to their credit, Ferrari did not question this because it's very much this is a slam dunk. Either you are within the regulations or you are not within the regulations. There is no two ways about it. It's a slam dunk.
yeah.
Um, so fair is fair. They'll take their medicine on that one. That's just the way it is. But it's a tiny margin. Um, Charles Leclerc's one is interesting as well because if I'm not wrong, the weight he was under accounted for the broken wing.
They're allowed to put this stuff. They're allowed to put the identical parts back on if they're
Yes.
broken to be weighed. So that winglet being off, they just, the FI delegate would be there, be able to show the team will be able to show this is the exact same specification of wing. They'll put it back on the car, they'll weigh it. So that
So
winglet doesn't cause an issue. It's nothing to do with it.
nothing to do with it at all because I've
No.
I've seen some people, oh, how can he be underweight because he broke his wing, blah blah blah. That is absolutely not why that happened. And if, like you said, they could have just shown them the wing. They could have put a replacement wing on before it was weighed.
Yeah.
They were allowed to do that. They didn't do it, but they were allowed to because that's how it works. And the fact of the matter is, he was like, but that's so I question this. We talked about this just before we started recording. I have a they claim that it was purely the tires like it was for George last year. But George last year, if I'm not wrong, was not a kilogram underweight. He was only a couple of 100 grams underweight. It wasn't a full kilo. And his was tires because they went super long and they grained like crazy and they were very nearly down to their laminates. I'm not 100% sure that is the full reason for Charles Leclerc because it's not like he's the only one who did a long stint on a single set of tires. A lot of people did. If anything, his tires actually grained less because of that wing damage. His
Well,
front left was put under less load going through those fast lefts because of the wing damage. So if anything, it grained less than others. So I'm not saying there's a conspiracy here. I'm just not saying I just say I don't personally believe until I firmly see otherwise that the tires were the sole reason that he was a kilo under. That to me sounds like a lack of fluid somewhere.
yeah, they've made some major miscalculation because
Yeah,
that's not a kilo's a lot.
it's a
Uh,
huge amount in a Formula One car.
so that's a lot for speed. Maybe that's why he's doing so well in the race with the broken wing. Uh, so yeah, there is something's really made majorly broke down system wide.
Yeah,
The skid the skid plate being point 0.5 under. Okay, that's could be riding a curb a wee bit more. That's not carrying the one when you're doing your mathematical sums. It's a very minor, probably a bit more explainable a mistake than the 1 kilo underweight because the finer margins should be happening in Formula One because it's Formula One and they should be the pinnacle and it's Ferrari of all teams. Uh,
hmm.
so yeah, you're right in that respect. Yeah, it's a strange one, and I'm sure we're probably never going to know unless there's some sort of whistleblower or some journalist that's in the know and Maranello that comes out and says that actually Charles Leclerc was this because of this, and it wasn't necessarily underweight for any other reason.
Yeah,
But it's not a good start after the disappointing result in Australia with everything that went on to kind of get themselves up to the roundabout where we expected them to be at the minute, and then to be disqualified. Yeah, it's not good. Not a
it's
good
not
look.
good. It's not at all. The other disqualification, of course, was Pierre Gasly, who I believe was also underweight.
He was indeed, yes, pretty similar situation. I'm not sure exactly how much underweight he was. He was 799 kilos, so he was yeah, he was just under the weight. So you need to be 800 kilos at the end. He was 799. So again, a kilo under. Uh, so yeah, it's disappointing when you're. Yep. So yeah, it's the same thing for Gasly and Charles Leclerc. Exactly the same. They were underweight by a kilo. Once the fuel was drained to check the car, and they were 1 kilo under. So
Mhm.
As you like you say, it's like getting a penalty for a jump start or a penalty for speeding in the pit lanes. They're slam dunks because their sense of, it's kind of yep, yep, yep. As soon as you go over that limit, that line, that's it. There's no ambiguity. There's no interpretations.
Mhm.
It's what it is. So
Yep. So that is it. So that triple DNF or DSQ, I should say, bumped Haas and Williams drivers all up a couple of places. And the Haas boys were the big, big winners there. They already had a good race. I think Esteban Ocon did a fantastic job,
hmm
and earned himself a promotion up to fifth place,
he did.
from seventh, which was already a very, very good result. And Ollie Behrman on International Bear Day, because apparently that's a thing, gets promoted from 10th up to 8th. So having not scored any points last week in Australia, Haas get their first points of the season with a double points finish, which leaves them fairly impressively already 6th in the standings ahead of Aston Martin. Um, so they're delighted. I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, that Kimi Antonelli got driver of the day because personally, I think it
I
should have
went.
gone to either or both of the Haas drivers. I think they
I
were both
was.
phenomenally good today.
Yeah, I wanted Beerman to get it. I don't see why Antonelli started eighth and finished eighth. What exactly did he do?
I'm not sure.
What he finished? Like,
Yeah,
okay, good.
I
And Beerman was firing that hash round, doing overtakes, harassing people. He was doing what a rookie should do: get him in there, be bullish, but not be, over the line and push it too far. Uh, Especially after the weekend that the Haas boys had, and especially after Behrman's weekend. I mean,
mm,
every time he touched that track in Australia, he was putting it in the wall. And then when he went to do qualifying, the car broke. So yeah, my driver of the day, I'm surprised he didn't get it, but that's a good performance. And then if we're talking about, who else got points because of a Ferrari disqualification, Carlos Sainz.
Carlos Sainz.
That's brilliant. So good.
I'd say he was the have because he did. Let's be perfectly frank. He did not have a good weekend, did Carlos Sainz?
No, he's struggling
He
a wee bit in the Williams for some reason.
He is, and on in the other side of the garage, to his top credit, there were some questions around Alex Albon. Has he had it too easy for a couple of years? And is he going to get done over by Carlos Sainz? Nope, he's taken him to the cleaners in the first couple of weekends. But a double points finish is a double points finish, and Williams, amazingly, are fourth in the championship.
Yes. Nice.
Stop the count, stop the count, stop the season. It's just. And Mercedes, the company, must be delighted looking at the standings because it's McLaren, Mercedes, Mercedes, Red Bull, Williams, Mercedes.
Yeah.
Three of the top four are Mercedes powered cars. So, yeah, they were obviously the big winners from the disqualification. So it's a long way back for Ferrari from that one because, like I said, McLaren now lead the way on 78 points, and Ferrari are only on 17. And yeah, the Ferrari drivers seem to be on a peg on a fair level with each other. Played the team game pretty well today. Even Lewis even came on the radio to say, "I'm actually holding Charles up. Do you want to swap positions?"
Yeah.
And eventually led him through to go and chase on. So top credit there, playing the team game. Is that going to happen when they're fighting for wins? Of course it's not. And all for naught in the end, unfortunately, because just the team got it wrong. There's no two ways about that. A skid plane and an underweight car is not the driver's fault.
No.
But
And
it
it
is a
shouldn't
team game.
happen.
It
It
shouldn't
should.
happen.
No, 100%. You just don't expect that from any team, but not from Ferrari.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of explaining to do while everyone's go back home to Italy, or the couple of days they might have off before they start digging into Japan's probably getting cancelled while the senior management come in to discuss what that fudge happened.
Yep.
So yeah, and it's disappointing end to a kind of lackluster couple of races so far for them, to be fair.
Yep, it is. Now, again, just to quote Christian Horner at the end, it's not, we saw last year, it's not how you start, it's how you finish, which is perfectly fair. And this time last year, McLaren were in a not as dramatic, but similar boat of a pretty poor start. They definitely did not look like championship winning, let alone championship challenging team or drivers at the start of last season. They went and won and challenged for both.
Mm.
So it's a very, very long season, plenty of time to go. And the fact of the matter is, they already have a win to their name. It's a sprint win, but they have a win, so they've proven that they get in the position they can do it. But that one is going to hurt Ferrari, I think, big time. The two of them, and it's a shame for them because they looked. I'm not going to say they looked dominant this week because they certainly didn't, but they looked a lot better than they did in Australia. Certainly a big step up one week to the next.
Yeah, they're kind of in the area at the end of the race before the disqualification where they should be. Fourth, fifth, maybe a third, fourth. I mean, the first and second, if you really go by pace in the car, it has to be the McLaren
Yeah.
because they just have the best car at this point in the season. As development start to kick in, probably around, six, seven, round six, seven, eight, around that kind of area when you get to the European races. That's when we're going to get to see things shape up and get a wee bit better and a bit closer. And, Red Bulls are going to be up there, whoever's driving their cars.
Mm.
Uh, and things will start to shape up a wee bit. But, I think the Ferraris should be sitting, they should be around third, fourth.
They
Red
should be.
Yeah, Max Verstappen came out when they were saying about you got the chance to challenge after qualifying. About no, we're not fast enough,
Only
and
if
they
everyone
went
ahead of
for
me retires.
yeah, and everyone kind of laughed it off. But he's like, no, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like we don't have the car this weekend, and he got what he got because he's Max Verstappen, and Max will get you something if you put him in a car that's more or less in the window. But again, even your generational talents that we've said quite a few times, they're not going to win races in cars that fundamentally aren't fast enough.
Yeah.
He'll get you points, he'll get you podiums, but if there's cars around you that are much better, then what you're going to do? I can't remember what year it was. The year that the Red Bulls had really bad reliability with the Renault car. I think it was the first season that Drive to Survive talked about it way back when. And the talk is this type, like with the aerodynamics, the car being so good and that Red Bull, they should have won the championships, at least the constructors, but they couldn't because of reliability. So, there's a lot of tools that need to work.
Hmm.
And Verstappen, I think, is kind of playing that long game of knowing that, I'm going to get the car here. We can't get it to the top spots just yet, but we will. And we'll get there or thereabouts. That's, I think, the hope of Red Bull as the development comes in, because let's face it, there will be a point at some point in the season where everybody's going to have to focus on 2026.
Hmm.
I think Aston Martin and I think Stake or Audis, it'll be pretty much conceded the season in terms of development, and
Yeah.
they've went with when you've got Adrian Newey and Aston Martin, don't worry about 25. We're fine. We'll
I'd
do what we need to do.
I'd say
Crack
that's
on.
certainly how Fernando Alonso is managing to sleep at night at the moment.
Well, he lasted, was it 6 laps, and he had the same brake issue by the looks of things that Verstappen had at Australia last year.
Yeah,
The rear right brake
just
went not
caught on,
not
caught on
quite as
fire.
dramatic as Verstappen's, but more or less the same thing.
Yeah, they caught it before. Actually, it was funny. Was it who was it that basically said Fernando's
I
brake?
think it was Charles Leclerc.
Charles, someone, yeah, said Fernando's brake is on fire, and it was Max who said Charles has a front wing damage. So top credit to all the drivers playing, very sportsmanlike, calling out like the safety issues of the other cars.
Yeah, that's
Definitely, they're
it's
calling
okay.
out, going, "Oh, I see an opportunity here. Help me."
Yeah.
I'll give them all the benefit of the doubt and say that it was super sporting of them all to call out all of the
Uh,
breakings and issues on the other
yeah,
cars.
as I was sitting watching it and it came up that he'd said it, I said to the partner, I was just like, yeah, they're not saying that to help. They're saying that so the FIA and the race steward can see it, because then they'll be like, what's that?
Yeah, is that something that
Yeah,
needs to be changed?
yes. So, that's, for any of the newbies out there, they're not doing each other a favor.
No,
Let's
they're
put it
certainly
that
not.
way.
No, certainly not. Well, there we go. That will do it for our Chinese Grand Prix weekend review. It was quite a good one. And we have finished our first double header of the season, and we look forward now to Japan. Earlier than usual because they've actually got a little bit clever with the schedules. They have moved the Middle Eastern races of Bahrain and Saudi Arabia back later in the season so that they don't get screwed around by Ramadan again like they did last year, and we don't end up with a race on a Saturday. Two races on a Saturday. Um, what are we expecting out of the Japanese Grand Prix on the 6th of April?
Oh, I mean, it's a classic track, isn't it? It's great. It's got so much history. It's just such a cool track. it wasn't a track I particularly enjoyed when I raced it in the game because I don't have the talent to race these things very well. That's why I don't buy them anymore. But as someone who's watched Formula One for as long as I have, Suzuka's been more or less a mainstay. I think there was a couple of years where it went to Fiji or Fuji. Uh,
Yep, Fuji was 2007 and 2008, I believe.
yeah, it was a couple of years, and it's a decent track, but there's just something about Suzuka that's just classic. And maybe it's me liking Senna in the first corner when he took out Prost and he'd done it straight away, and the whole thing that's infamous. There's a gap, you're not a racing driver, and getting angry, then coming out later and going, yeah, there was no gap. I'm like, yeah, we know where we're no
Hmm.
daft. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to being back to a traditional setting. And it'll be nice to see how it goes. And I think all eyes are going to be on the racing bulls. And interestingly, I was looking on Twitter there just to touch on that. And apparently, Red Bull are looking to speak to Alpine about loading Franco Colapinto.
That I could be very interesting.
So it would be Sonoda to Red Bull, Colapinto to the Racing Bulls, and Liam Lawson put out to pasture. Now,
Yeah, pretty
the
much.
only thing that will do is take a wee bit of pressure off of doing. That's it for the Alpine side because Colapinto will have his race drive. What will happen then is they're giving him his race drive if this was to happen, ready to put him in for the next season because he'll be racing regularly. Um, and then obviously they'll be able to see the comparatives between the two. But again, going by the way Red Bulls do their business with drivers, any other teams talk about that, we're kind of putting that with a big picture salt
Mm.
because it's Red Bull and because Liam Lawson's had such a horrible start to the season. I wouldn't be surprised. But to be completely clear, this is a tweet that I've seen. It's complete speculation, same
Yeah,
as the previous stuff. I'm
mm,
just saying there may be an element of truth
there
in
may
this
be
whole thing. There may
there.
be discussions about it and it might not come off as they want it, so they just stick with them, or something happens and they end up just saying, Lost it, Liam, you know what? We've made the wrong call. Catch you later. Here's your contract buyout, or we're going to put you in another racing bull, Red Bull series somewhere or whatever that may
Hmm.
be. Uh, so, as we do now after each race, I put up a wee post on Facebook and I asked them how people thought. 76 people reacted and said it was all right. 46 were bored, and 18 people thought it was a classic. Now, I'm not going to push it out too far, but I think those 18 people are McLaren fans. I don't know why
What
I'm
makes you
coming
say
up with
that?
that conversation because it was a decent race. I wouldn't go as far as to say it was a classic,
No,
although,
I don't think I'd say it was a classic. I remember sitting there at lap 26 and thinking, Jesus, we're not even halfway through the damn race yet. Because a lot had happened, and then nothing happened, and then sort of
something.
still nothing happened because all the main drama happened several hours after the race. But
Yes.
interesting feedback and reviews there.
But I mean, it could just be because I put good, classic and good in the same category, and okay and me in the same category, and then bored as a category separate. So, boring, hated it was the other one.
Hmm.
But yeah, I found it okay. It was enough to keep my attention. Uh, there was things going on, random wings breaking, Charles Leclerc managing to survive with his wing being the way it is. And then, of course, the last few laps, Lando Norris's brake pedal deciding that it wasn't wanting to do its job. And then everybody in a McLaren fan was just like, oh, please, 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 please. So it was good. It wasn't France from a few years ago, let's put it that way.
No, I don't think anything will ever beat France in terms of just terrific boredom.
Yeah, it was like a half-hour highlight show, and they showed everyone go into the pits
Yeah.
from start to finish. Like,
How quick was were your tires changed? Well, there we go. That will do it for this week's episode. Thank you very, very much for listening. Thank you for joining me, Coops.
thank you very much. Thank you.
This was a good one. If you've been watching on YouTube, please do give us a like and a subscribe. We're nearly at 100 subscribers. Doesn't sound like much, but we've got to start somewhere. We are aiming to get to our 1,000 subscribers by the summer break at Formula One in August. So, any help you could give us with that would be absolutely fantastic and very much appreciated. So, do give us a like and subscribe over on YouTube if you wouldn't mind. The next race, as I mentioned, is Japan. A couple of weeks off now after that double header. The race is on Sunday, the 6th of April, UK Ireland time. The race starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. So, another early one. But you'll be delighted to know that that is the last early one for the rest of the season until Miami, possibly. Yeah, that's the last early one until Vegas at 4 o'clock in the morning. So what?
Wow.
Yeah, one more early one to set your alarms for. 6 o'clock start for the Japanese Grand Prix, and then we get into the fun stuff of Bahrain at normal times. After that, we will be back for that with a preview next week and a review of the race after that. So do hit subscribe wherever you are listening to make sure you get the next episodes into your earlobes. Check us out on all socials. In the meantime, you'll find us at Join EF1 everywhere. You also check out our website, everythingf1.com, for daily news and articles about all things motorsport. And if you're looking to go to a race this year, or just want some new F1 merch for your wardrobe, check out our sponsors, theraceworks.com, for all of your F1 and motorsport merch needs. Use our code EF1 at checkout for 10% off site wide. Thank you very much again, Goops. Thank you for listening. I've been Sean. We will chat to you again next week. Bye now.
Bye.